Should Donald Trump take the BBC to the cleaners? 0344 499 1000. I'll get to your calls on that shortly. If you're just joining us, a second heavily edited, misleading clip aired on the BBC on a different flagship show. We know about the Panorama misinformation, which led to an apology from the corporation, which was posted just 24 hours ago. Well, they might need a second apology because Newsnight, 2 years previously, broadcasted again a misleading, poorly edited clip in regard to the January the 7th demonstrations in the capital. Let's take a listen to BBC's Newsnight programme's edited Trump footage. Take a listen to this.
We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
OK, now that's gone out. Whilst on air, a former Donald Trump advisor who became a critic of Donald Trump, Mick Mulvaney, a guy I've interviewed many times, he knows his onions, live on air on Newsnight, he called out the misinformation of a clip that he'd just heard. Take a listen.
Your video actually spliced together the presentation. He said, we're going to go down and we're going to cheer on our senators and our House members. And then it actually goes on to say, in some of them, we might not be able to. And that line about we fight and fight like hell is actually later in the speech. And yet your video makes it look like those two things came together. That's the type of messaging here that so many people in my country find frustrating, is that it's hard to actually get the facts.
Let's get reaction now from a former top BBC presenter, Sally Jones. Sally, a fresh headache. The BBC may need to issue a second apology, given the fact that another of their iconic brands, this time Newsnight, mired in this misinformation scandal. What a hot mess.
It really is a hot mess. I mean, it couldn't have come at a worse time. I'm just wondering whether the Telegraph has got any more and they're just sort of bringing it out in dribs and drabs, although I think that this came out because a whistleblower at the BBC, having seen all the row over Panorama, then remembered virtually, well, a very similar edit of the same clip to give that same falsification of what Trump was actually saying. I think they're going to have to do the mother of all grovelling apologies second time around. I also think that they're apparently next week's Wreath lectures are pretty much focused on what a dreadful man Trump is. So if I were them, I would get somebody else to take a totally different topic, or the same person making the lectures, because it's just going to drive Trump wild. I mean, Trump generally has a great regard for Britain. We've seen how much he loves the royal family, how much he adores being part of that inner circle, being invited to Windsor, invited to to their various great social events. But I think it may be that he doesn't sue, that he takes the magnanimous high line here and says, oh, well, I love the Brits. But I have a horrible feeling that he will at least make some moves in the suing direction, because he's got pretty good form for suing media outlets and even people like universities who are mostly not overburdened with money to be able to pay the, what could be biggish compensation. I don't think for a moment that in any court, Florida or Britain, he'd get anything like $1 billion, because it will be so difficult to prove. And America, of course, have very strong press freedom regulation over their media, the freedom of the press. So I think that it will be particularly difficult in Florida. I don't think Trump will really want a long and expensive legal trial that he might not win, however much he would like to give the BBC a bloody nose. But it's not looking great for them, and I do think they need a root and branch reform of their whole editorial policy and standards in news and current affairs.
And a second doctored clip is damning, isn't it, from 2 years before the airing of the Panorama documentary, Sally, with a guest on the show who had become a Trump critic, Mick Mulvaney, Donald Trump's former chief advisor, chief of staff, calling out the misleading clip live on air with a minimal reaction from the presenter and no inquiry following that broadcast.
it was extraordinary at the post-mortem the following day that nobody took it seriously, because Mulvaney, as you say, is a wonderfully experienced, balanced man. He'd already resigned from being, the acting White House chief of staff, so he was not a Trump apologist at all at that time. And yet he still immediately spotted it. It immediately rang alarm bells in his head. And I'm surprised, because I've worked a lot with Kirsty Walk. She's a hugely experienced presenter. I was surprised that somebody like that, even if she brushed over it during the actual programme, that she didn't at least flag up that, that this had been something that was brought to everybody's attention instantly. It was played. It wasn't something that didn't come up on air. It was there for everybody to hear. So yes, it is looking bad. And the problem is, it makes it more difficult for the BBC to claim that the Panorama was an honest mistake. The fact that it had been done twice, first of all, on the Panorama by an independent production company, but prior to that on Newsnight by the in-house team. It was not an independent production company. These were BBC staffers and people within the BBC that were making that particular package.
What do you make of former BBC stars current actually, Nick Robinson and John Simpson, who have circled the wagons to defend the BBC? Are they in denial about the fact that this corporation is in the grip of leftist groupthink?
I think they're totally in denial. You see these sort of lefty worthies like Polly Toynbee, Alistair Campbell, and some of the BBC staffers like Robinson and co. And they just think that it's a right-wing conspiracy, a right-wing plot. It's not. Obviously, there are people on the right who are not entirely delighted with the BBC and believe that it is a bit of an echo chamber. But there are plenty on the left who also, and in the centre, who also think that the BBC has behaved incredibly badly here. I think that the Robinsons of this world are trying to say nothing to see here, pass along. And it's just not going to wash. More and more things are coming out, and this tends to become a flood. When you get a couple of bad stories like that, it's almost like a house of cards. More very often tend to come out. I wouldn't be at all surprised if other things surface, putting them in an even more difficult position. It's not good enough just to say, oh, it's those nasty Tories, they're just conspiracists.
Sally, always a pleasure to have you on the show. We'll catch up soon. Former BBC star Sally Jones damning about the corporation. In the spirit of balance, the BBC would argue that they produce hundreds of hours of content every week, the vast majority of which is balanced and fair, that the BBC is the most trusted news source, not just in the UK, but around the world. They could also argue that with millions of viewers and listeners, most of what they do is going down very well with the public. So I'll offer that by way of balance. But what do you think?